You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
This episode of the Dave Bullets Podcast is brought to you by Slash Cards. Slash Cards is the horror movie trivia card game available now on Amazon. You can find a link through our show notes at davebullets.com. Thank you very much for joining me for another episode of this podcast, everybody. Before I get to today's podcast, one quick thing to mention, and that is, again, my filmmakers group on Facebook. It's a secret group or a private group now, and if you want to be a part of it, just let me know, or just click on the link in the show notes at davebullets.com, and I'll approve the membership. Basically, it's just a group I wanted to make that's different than all the other groups out there, and it's not just crowdfunding campaigns and, useless crap every other time somebody posts something. So just check out that group. It's pretty good. It's going pretty well so far, and, let me know what you think. So on today's episode of the Dave Bullets Podcast, I have actor, stuntman, and founder of the St. Bab's Church. We're going to talk about everything from his first starring role in Tromeo and Juilet, where he was Tromeo, which was actually written by James Gunn, to moving to India to star in Bollywood films, to becoming an exec at some of the biggest content studios around. This is episode 145 with guest Will Keenan.
You're listening to the Dave Bullets Podcast.
Hey, Will, thanks a lot for coming on the podcast.
Dave Bullets, how are you?
I am doing very well, Will. How are you doing on this fine Sunday morning?
It's beautiful down here in Cape May County, New Jersey. And hey, just so you know, this opportunity to speak with you for your podcast, which I've now checked out, kind of came out of nowhere in a way, but I'm glad we're doing it. And I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to now promote you as the podcast man in the Philly area.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. That's the way I try to do it. I sort of come out of nowhere, and I sort of find people on social media, and I sort of go, "Hey, I'm Dave. I got this podcast. Do you want to come on and talk?" But I'm like, I'm a big deal in my own head, but I get opportunities via social media. People ask me to be on podcasts or speak at conferences or whatever, and I always then check their social media. You'd be surprised how many people like reach out without having their own, especially for something like a podcast that is social, at least the sharing of it, online. You'd be surprised how many people reach out for a request but don't have their own channels optimized, if you know what I mean. So all I do is, like, in one click, I know whether I'm going to say yes or no. So you were a big yes with the exclamation point. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I try my best with my social media, and I know your social media. That's great, and I agree with you because I see other people who have podcasts and such, and even actors, producers, directors, screenwriters, and I see their some of their social media, and it's like nothing. It's just it's just sort of sitting there, and that's how they're going to promote their stuff. But I'm glad that you could come on, and I want to talk to you obviously about your career. You got some awesome credits. And I also want to talk to you about, all the great things that you're working on. So, just to start, I guess, at the beginning, how did you, find yourself in the film industry? So, what was sort of your impetus to start in this industry?
Yeah, my first film was I was cast in right before I graduated, or went down the graduation aisle at New York University. And oh boy, is this before you were born, Dave? 1995, summer of 1995, right before, I think the week before NYU's graduation, I had been cast as the lead in Troma's film Tromeo and Juliet. So that was my first film, and it was a starring role. And I was not familiar with Troma at the time. Throughout NYU, I had been doing a lot of kind of performance art, dance, theater, that kind of thing. And prior to that, when a lot of my generation got into the Troma movies, I was out climbing trees and doing stunts and stuff. So when I saw the casting like a week before NYU graduation, I was with a friend of mine. He's like, "Oh my God, Troma's casting." I'm like, "Who's Troma?" And he was like, "What?" And then I went in for the casting and read for producer Andrew Weiner. And then I was called back for Andrew and James Gunn, and they were videotaping the auditions. And I could tell, like, after the first callback, I was getting close, at least to be considered. And then word came back that Lloyd, the director, and Mr. Troma, had seen the tapes and wanted to do a few more callbacks and put me through the grind, so to speak. But I think it may have been Andrew Weiner. Someone tipped me off to the fact that Lloyd's wife, Patty Pie, Pat Kaufman, who was then she had been for like 20 years, the New York State Film Commissioner, that she really liked me and she was voting for me. So at that point I knew I was probably going to get it. And Lloyd told this story once, I think it was a few years ago, in some kind of interview where he said I walked in with a pizza box for the audition as a prop or something, and it's very likely I would have done something like that, but I don't remember. So look, that was my foray into the film industry, because when I was at NYU and right before graduation, I had been a part of this performance art dance troupe called Via Theater, and we had done a few shows and got great New York Times reviews, and I was so fulfilled creatively that at the time I was like, even after spending, I think it was like $40,000 to $45,000 a year on NYU with curriculum and room and board for 4 years. At the end of that, I was so happy with what I was doing, kind of avant-garde theater in New York City, that I said, I don't care if I never make a dime at this. I want to do this for the rest of my life. But then that fateful day, why don't you just go? My friend saying you should go audition for Tromeo. So that kind of changed everything, because once I got that role, although let's just say cult film wasn't such a huge departure from avant-garde theater, I mean, wild, wacky, weird stuff, I caught the film bug, because when we premiered Tromeo at the Cannes Film Markets, and I guess it was the year after, 96 or maybe 97, I saw myself on the big screen and I thought, oh my God, there's a huge difference between theater acting and film acting. And I didn't know the difference when I started that movie. And I thought I looked like a Troma monster, So once something like that usually happens, then I want to figure it out. So it's not that I switched to film after that, but I did some theater. But, I think I racked up 25 or more independent films during that period right after Tromeo in New York City. It was almost like the last hurrah of indie film in New York City. I guess, according to Pat, 95, 94, a boycott had happened. A boycott was finally over, and then a lot of indie film in New York was getting made, and Good Machine, Cineblast, Miramax, so many great films and filmmakers were coming out of New York City at the time. So I did a lot of them, and a lot of cool stuff. A number of it got distribution, some of it broke through, got great distribution, and some of them were never to be seen again after that first screening. But starting out as Tromeo, which it's one thing to be a lead in a Troma movie or to be in a Troma movie, but to be branded as Tromeo. Even though I was able to do a lot of other, films after that, it was almost like it's almost like starting out in porn. I mean, Troma's not porn, but, it opened up some doors and it slammed other ones shut. So after Tromeo, I had to work really hard, and this is no slight against Lloyd or Troma. He's a mentor of mine in a lot of ways, and fiercely independent and just a really good human being overall. So I don't, no slight on Troma, but I had to work really hard after Tromeo to kind of just be, accepted in the legitimate indie film industry, if you can, call it that. And at the time they were kind of like, I think a lot of the, the certain film organizations back then, kind of looked down upon Troma because of their genre of filmmaking. But, they've been around for over 40 some odd years. And I think one of the longest running independent film companies in the world. So, I mean, Lloyd's been awarded all over the place. He's never won the Oscar yet, but he says I should have won the Oscar for my second Troma movie. I did two of them. I starred as the cinema's first hermaphrodite serial killer in Terra Firma. He says I should have won for that. Until Chop, what fans I have left say that playing the lead in Terra Firma was my best role. But Chop, I think, at least with my 10 fans left, they say that's the best one. Anyway, so that's how the career started. And then, like I said, I think it was timing. It was the last hurrah of the indie film boom in New York City. And I was working real hard, and I just got into the scene. I've said to a lot of actors, I still have actors who come and either, ask me to help them out or became a producer and financier to help them with their films or to give them advice. And definitely if you're an actor and you're serious about it and you're actually getting schooling, take audition classes. It's a completely different technique than actual acting on stage or film. And film acting is different from theater acting, is different from TV acting, is now different from like YouTube acting. But there's a technique for auditions all itself. And I don't out of 50 some odd projects, films, short films, TV, so forth and so on, maybe less than a handful I actually got cast via the audition, because I was just a horrible auditioner. And even at NYU with all that curriculum, I had never taken an audition technique class, which I would have done if I were to do it over. And same thing with like the business of entertainment or the business of acting kind of classes. I would have done the same thing. Anyway, most of the roles I was cast in as an actor were, either someone telling the filmmaker that they should meet me or talk to me or see my work, or meeting the filmmaker at like an independent film event or a film festival. And I like to say I was cast more late at night at some indie film, event after getting to know somebody, the filmmaker, than I was in auditions. But that's how it all started. And then, indie film business is hard. I mean, even though it was the last hurrah, it was never a sustainable business. Out of all the movies I made, I don't think I ever made a dime. In fact, I lost a lot of personal money. And then as the internet kind of gained influence, we saw, the audiences for the format of a feature-length independent film. We saw less and less people wanting to go see those, especially in the theaters. I liken it to now, if I were to talk to someone pretty much under the age of 30 and say, hey, let's go see this really cool independent film, what I get is, oh God, no, please, which is the same thing that I used to do to people when they would ask me, in the late 90s to go see a theater piece. I was like, oh God, no, because I'd seen so much bad theater. So many people by the early mid 2000s had seen so many bad independent films, Yeah. So that, by the time the economic downturn happened, and I was financing movies, producing movies, getting them distributed. I was a distributor myself with Go-Kart for a few years back then. And, it takes at least in most cases, 2 years out of your life to make an independent film. You beg, borrow, and steal. And, you're lucky to get into a big festival. If you do, you can have a healthy festival run. Unfortunately, that's like your theatrical now, because you're lucky if you get a real theatrical deal. People are like giving their movies away to distributors. You're lucky to get a TV deal. I could get a VOD deal. But at the end of the day, you're lucky if 5,000 people see your movie, So this is like 2006, 2007. And I had a number of projects that were, some were high profile indie films. But then I saw, and I was very aware of online video, especially YouTube, when it first came out back then. And I just knew that was essentially the future. And I think like 10 years ago, I put up my actor's reel on there, and I think it has over 100,000 views by this point. But, if I were to do it all over again, no regrets. I love my life and career. I'm doing fine. But I always think like, okay, if I were to have done things differently, I think I would have essentially switched to online video back then in 2006, rather than take another few years doing American independent film. And then when the economic downturn got really, really bad, I think it was 2008, 9, 10-ish, I went to Bollywood. I went to India at first on an exploratory trip because they have the largest independent film industry in the world. And there's actually like 4 distinct film industries there: Bollywood, Tollywood, Collywood, and so forth, that that I started working there for a number of years and worked with some of the biggest stars there and made a few movies there, and things were going great. I was well received. They kind of rolled out the red carpet for me. My Indian friends now tell me that it was because I was a Westerner and had some real, Hollywood credits. But my trips there kept getting longer and longer, and I was living like a king. I was on the cover of like the New York Post of all of India, called the Bombay Times, I think they called me a young hot Hollywood producer. And I had a driver, a chef, a gardener. I was, like I said, living like a king. But at the time, I was married, and I think my last trip there was 8 months. My wife, who has done very well for herself in Hollywood, said, "Hey, look, if you don't come back, we're going to have a problem in our marriage." And I'm not coming there because she was doing well here, building up her business. So I think it was within 3 days I was back on a flight to Los Angeles, and I think this is like spring of 2011. And this was the time I said, "All right, this is a career transition, still entertainment, but I'm going to move from quote unquote traditional film, independent film, studio film, TV, whatever, to online video, to digital." So I locked myself in our house, and for about 3 weeks, I put myself through a boot camp of trying to learn everything I could about online video. And YouTube especially, because that's when it was kind of the rise of the MCNs, the multi-channel networks. And I did that for about 3 weeks. And my now ex-wife will tell you that we had a big dining room table. It was just filled with stacks of printouts with highlights and notations and underlines. And at the end of that 3 weeks, I was like, I know everything about online video, which wasn't true, but I was confident enough that I'm one of those guys who thinks, what you think about, you bring about, especially if you have positive, confident thoughts about it. So I think it was like 2 days later after my boot camp that I put myself through to learn online video, I got a call from the then head of human resources at a company called Maker Studios, which was a growing multi-channel network. I think it was number 1 or number 2 at the time on YouTube as a network. And then started working there. It was a very small operation at the time. The 3 founders hired me, and I worked with them directly. And I think I was the 51st full-time employee, and there's like 300 channels we had on YouTube at the time, getting about 300 million views every month across the network. And the company was valuated, I think at the time, at like 25-ish to $30 million. And then by the time I left 2 years later as VP of Network Development and Original Programming, wait a minute, I got that wrong. VP of Network Programming and Original Development, whatever, it was a long title. We had, I think, 110,000 channels, almost 5 billion views a month, and the company was being valuated, I think, at the time at close to $300 million. And then right when I knew the sale to Disney was happening and that there was going to be a big transition, I had been getting other offers from kind of rival MCNs and so forth at the time. And then I accepted the job at Endemol to be their president of their first kind of digital division in North America. And that was another 2 years after that, which was great. That was my, so I guess transitioning from indie film, Bollywood film to digital, I also went, although truth be told, I stopped acting like 10 or so years ago. The movies that came out over the past, 4 or 5, 6 years, or ones that I had been involved with in some way or another years ago, but I haven't, sought acting roles in many, many years. So, but that was the other part of the transition. I was, going from actor, producer, so forth and so on, and traditional to digital entertainment executive. And then did that for 2 years at Endemol, which was great. We became, then I think the first 6 or 8 months, we got all these awards, and we're the fastest growing MCN. And then there was a couple other monikers that that we were given, which was great. And then after that, again, it was kind of like, I don't know if a mirrored Maker, but there was a merger going on with Endemol and another big company called Shine. And I had been told that even before I was hired, that this merger was eventually going to happen during my tenure. And then I said, and it was an old friend and colleague, Charlie Corwin, brilliant dude, who's at least reported about to take over as CEO, or actually it's a newly formed position as CEO of Imagine Entertainment. So Charlie's killing it. So yeah, he brought me into Endemol and he told me about the merger. And we kind of made a gentleman's agreement. I said, all right, look, I'll build what I say I'm going to build for 2 years. And then, kind of all bets are off. And, because I like to, I feel like I've had 9 careers. I like to build things and then essentially, hopefully set them up with the right people to continue and then move on to something else. So that happened. And then I took I was asked to join StreamUp at the time, the largest and fastest growing at the time, live streaming network. And I was president of that for 6 months. And then it was during that 6 months, I realized, towards the end of it, I was entering the 25th year of my professional career. And I really just decided to take stock of it all. And I thought I needed a break. I realized my mother was falling ill. So I kind of announced and left that I was taking a sabbatical for 6 months, a true sabbatical away from the industry. And what I was really doing was doing that, but also spending time with my mother and attempting to take care of my mother as she started to fall ill. And I thought, she would give me, at least the 6 months, but I got there and my sisters say she just kind of waited for me to come home to pass because she gave me 6 days instead of 6 months. And that was July 5th. And then instead of going right back to work or going right back to Hollywood, I decided to continue with the sabbatical and reconnect with family and friends. And then, really kind of go on a walkabout and decide what I wanted to do with the next few years or with the rest of my life and career. And it kind of all, came together. It's like divine intervention because, my mother's little condominium in South New Jersey, when I would come home, and unfortunately, the past few years, I was only able to get home 2 or 3 times a year, whether just to go see her and my family, or because I had business or was speaking at conferences or conventions in New York. I'd always visit them. But it used to be before she started to fall ill a few years ago, that everyone could come over and we used to sleep 6 to the floor, friends, family, when I was back in town. But, as she started to get sick, I realized, I couldn't make her house the congregation house anymore. So I'd been looking for property to buy in South Jersey. But then everything happened. She passed quicker than I had imagined. So then there was this opportunity to buy this I think it's a 108-year-old historic church in Cape May County, Cape May Courthouse to be specific, one of the favorite areas of my mother. And I renamed it St. Babs in honor of my mother. Her name is Barbara. And I started a foundation, a not-for-profit 501c3 charity called the Barbara A. C's Keenan Foundation. And it's essentially to continue her work. She was a registered nurse her whole life and career. And if you look at some of our online channels, you'll see that people have said that she was like the Mother Teresa of nursing, So I really believe that my mother did not become a doctor, which is what everyone thought she should do, because she kind of raced through nursing school and was the kind of nurse where doctors would defer to her. But I believe she didn't go because she had to put me through NYU. And in that way, this is my way of saying, okay, some people think I'm nuts for, what a lot of people would think is the, peak of my career right now, to kind of leave Hollywood and go do this not-for-profit. But I kind of think the opposite. To me, it's I'm doing this to spread her good work and to also take all the skills I've learned in Hollywood and apply them to something that, I think can do some real good in this community and the surrounding communities where we are in South Jersey, but also it's going to have a very strong online digital component. So I hope to be able to, do the same kind of, services for people online as well. That was a long-winded answer to, so tell us about how you started your career. In fact, I started and finished my career. There you go.
It's okay, Will. I tend to ask open-ended questions, and I love hearing stories like yours. And that was an amazing career you've had. But and there's certain things obviously I want to ask some more questions about. Just sort of going back to talking about how when you first got started and you were working on Tromeo and Juliet. James Gunn was a writer on that, and James Gunn just sort of
he was more than a writer.
Yeah,
he was Lloyd's right hand. James wrote it. He was I'd say the main non-financial producer, besides Lloyd. And Lloyd is the first to admit this, and maybe if people watch, certain documentaries, Farts of Darkness, the Troma Apocalypse movie, Lloyd gives people like James and myself, and after me, I think it was Trent Haga, lots of people before, he takes people like that who show the passion, the drive, have the talent, and who will, stay up all night to make the Troma movie. He gives them a lot of autonomy, and so James did so much. He essentially, these people like James, or myself for Terra Firma, or Trent for Citizen Toxie 4, it's an uncredited kind of co-director position. And I think Lloyd has said that before. But you work with all the actors, you rehearse them, you stage all the scenes. There's so much, and James, not only wrote a brilliant script, but he was, besides Lloyd, he was the main guy on that movie.
Yeah, it's I've actually had Lloyd on the podcast before, and we've talked about James, and also about Trent, and also about what you were just saying, where he would find different people and sort of shepherd them along in different projects. Give them a chance to maybe write the next Troma movie, and that's it's just funny. It's a small world, because usually most people I have on this podcast, one way or another, have met or worked with Lloyd in some capacity, because he's everywhere, right?
And we've all learned so much from Lloyd. I mean, I didn't go to film school, right? So Troma was my film school, and it was the art of low budget filmmaking and the art of guerrilla marketing. The art of the soundbite. Lloyd is a genius, and one of the things we all learned from him is that he's a very, very passionate guy. So his energy, especially on set, is so very intense. But he's been doing it so long, and he's a genius himself, that he has this intuition, this sixth sense about him. Like, I remember he'd be saying things, well, you gotta watch out for this, you gotta worry about that. And I'm like, Lloyd, that'll never happen because of this or that. And he's just like, all right, you'll see. And then it would happen. And I'd be like, there was no rational reason for that to happen, except Lloyd he could almost foresee the future when it comes to being on a film set. It's amazing. So we've all learned so much from Lloyd, and look, there's so many people who've gone through, the Troma school, so to speak, and look what they're doing now. I think James Gunn is the latest, prototypical, is that a word, example. He's one of the biggest directors in Hollywood right now. And, I am honored that James and I made our first movie together, and that was Tromeo.
Yeah, it's amazing, how far James has gotten. When he made Super, and then now with Guardians of the Galaxy. I mean,
well, here's the thing, and I've told James this. Like, Super, although an awesome movie and produced by someone I had worked with before, Ted Hope, one of the best film producers in the world. He's now running Amazon Film, and before Super came out, like, Ted's got a bit, pretty sizable social media audience. James had one. And if I were to go by what social media was saying, I thought Super, which I think the budget was around $4 million, was going to be like a hit, like with the indie film, the little $4 million indie film that could. But theatrically, and this goes back to what I was saying, about switching, when I decided to switch from indie film to digital, theatrically, I think it made $100,000 at the box office. And as someone who started out with James, who, was a supporter of James and a longtime friend of James, I was like, oh shit, man, this could hurt his career, and I thought he would have been left for dead, but Marvel, such an amazing company and amazing movies. I'm told, not by James, you hear stories that that they started to look at some of the properties and characters and brands that have not been licensed either by others or, Marvel would make in partnership with others. And they started looking at it, and then they started, attaching essentially, known fanboy directors, ones that have the cred, the kind of the fan cred and the cult cred like James, and then hire them and surround them with top above the line crew. And wow, look what he was able to accomplish, with essentially Marvel backing him after, he had a movie that wasn't a huge hit. I think critically it was okay. But, when I was a producer and actually raising the money for movies, I started, and this is right before I switched to digital, I started becoming a tyrant in a way because, every $200,000, every $1 million, in an independent film it's because a lot of them go over budget, although not mine where I was writing the checks, and it takes so much out of your life that. Hold on real quick. My dog wants to get in. Hold on.
Sure, no problem.
All right, Chesney, you here? All right. Where was I? What was I talking about?
Are you talking about your money in the producing indie film?
Oh yeah, I was becoming a tyrant where. When it came to, I'd source a property, I'd start to come out with the potential like talent and above the line crew attachments. And then I would talk to my pool of investors and then start, early talks with distributors and buyers and so forth. And it got to the point where unless the directors, on my short list, unless their last movie was a critical and commercial success, like I don't care if you made the movie for $1, did you make the dollar back? Did you make $1.10? Because a lot of those things, when you're doing the financing of independent films, a lot of those things, falls into the whole number crunching algorithm, bankable or not, you know what I mean? And that was in addition to me trying to put in, and successfully the last few movies, putting in directors' contracts that, they were obligated to, produce a shot list and storyboards and everything. Because too many times in indie film, I mean, it's like, look, if you're making a movie that costs $1 or $100,000 or $1 million, it's the same. It's essentially the same amount of work. The crew could be bigger or smaller, but when you really break it down, there's a very smart production manager named Randy Turow in LA who taught me this when we were making a movie called The Politics of Love. Because Shirley MacLaine, the Oscar-winning actress, was in the cast, and she wanted her character to have like one of those little lap dogs, almost as a prop. And she was an Oscar-winning actress, and I was a little not starstruck, but I wanted to make her happy because if Shirley MacLaine isn't happy, you got problems with the production, okay? But when I was telling my production manager about this, he's like, no, it'll cost too much money. I'm like, what are you talking about? What does a dog cost per day? And it'll only be like, I think it was 9 days out of the 18-day shoot, we would need the dog. And yeah, the trainer, you need a trainer, legally and all that kind of stuff. He said, okay, there's that. This is how much that costs. He said, but when you break down our budget, every day of shooting, every 10 minutes costs this much money. And he said, if that dog poops on set, if that dog won't do the take, you're wasting 5 minutes, 10 minutes. There's thousands, tens of thousands of dollars going out the door. And I was like, holy shit, man. So that was one of the lessons. I don't know what brought me to that. Was I trying to get to another larger point?
Yeah, it's what.
Oh, is it James? Yeah. So anyway, Viva la James Gunn. Viva Los James Gunn? Viva Lou James Gunn?
It's because it's just like you were saying with Super. Yeah, I was just gonna say that it's amazing. That where he's been able to do, and that's why I always am down.
And he never went to film school either.
Yeah,
Troma was his film school. So and here he's how many studio like superhero movie, mainstream like popcorn movie directors never went to film school.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess James Gunn did. He went to the film school of Troma, but he was, I think he had just graduated or he was his last year or something at Columbia as a writer. You know, when we started Tromeo in summer of '95.
Yeah, because when you look at all the directors that went to that didn't go to film school, I mean, like Tarantino didn't go. I can't remember if Kevin Smith hasn't gone, but yeah, and James Gunn. You know, you can have that.
Yeah, there's not many. I mean, who get, like, you know, even Tarantino movies. You know, they limit that budget to a certain extent. You know what I mean? I think James Gunn's first Guardians of the Galaxy budget was, I'm just going to take a wild guess here, considerably higher than all of Tarantino's budgets.
Yeah. I think the first Guardians was somewhere around maybe 1 or 120, I think, somewhere around there.
Yeah, and look, you would know better than me, and I'm guessing Tarantino got to play with 100 milli, at least for one of his movies, but maybe not. I think when you add the marketing into, you know, the budgets, but then, you know, same thing. You add how much they spent on marketing Guardians, and it blows, you know, the overall budget of any of Tarantino's movies out of the water. I think I'm right. And if anyone's listening to this podcast, please Google it right now and find out.
No, I'm pretty, I'm like 100% sure that, you know, you're absolutely right, Will, because, you know, I think the most money a Tarantino movie costs to make, just production without marketing, I think was Inglourious or Django, and I want to say it was around 60 million just to make it. If you add in marketing, it's probably, you know, bumped up to maybe 100 or so. Yeah. But with Guardians, I mean, it's probably when you add.
And look, there's a difference. I mean, Tarantino's movies are, although James wrote the script for Guardians, they were the original concepts. You know, the inception of the idea was his, right? And then he you know, his first real breakout film was Reservoir Dogs, and then, you know, with Harvey, and played the Miramax game for a while. And James was hired to write and direct Guardians, but, you know, that was I think a long time coming for James. He's been, you know, a comic book fan for a long, long time. I'm sure Tarantino is as well to a certain extent, but maybe not, you know, like James is. Although I have to believe Tarantino has been offered to direct and or write some kind of superhero movie.
Yeah, I think he was trying at one point to get on the Bond franchise, and I think when they were going to reboot Casino Royale,
really?
And I think he made a pitch, and they were actually going to legitimately think about hiring him, and instead they went. I don't think it was Sam Mendes on that one, but I forget who it was on the first Casino Royale. But yeah, so that's, you know, who knows? But if Tarantino could ever, you know, do the superhero movie the way, because I mean, you know, sometimes, again, like you said, Will, when you're working with a studio,
did he say he's going to retire soon?
Well, after 10 movies, so he's got 2 left.
Okay, well, so maybe one will be a superhero movie.
Yeah, because I know, because, you know, when you're working with studios, there's expectations of, you know, like I said, intellectual property of pre-existing characters, and, you know, and then, you know, you have your artist vision, and you know, as we speak about that, that's something that has, you know, I've seen as sort of, it's almost a mixed match of styles, and I think James has been one of those guys who's this is even more rare now. Because when you see these different styles, you know, you see the problems with Fantastic Four and Josh Trank. Then you see the problems with, you know, like Suicide Squad and David Ayers. There's a clash of styles, and it's just a lot of these studios want to go out and they want to get, you know, avant-garde directors or maybe some indie darling directors, but it very rarely does it ever work out, and it worked out for James. But you know, as you talk about independent film, though, Will, you know, as you talk about, you know, making independent films, you know. Have you, you know, seen, you know, with all the advances in digital technology, and you work for Maker Studio, have you ever thought about, you know, maybe, you know, going on like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, or maybe crowdfunding like an indie film with a smaller budget, and maybe, you know, shooting it on like, you know, like a Red or you know, something like that that's a digital format? Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, I have, and I may, you know, I have. You know, I'm doing what I'm doing now with St. Babs, the foundation I started down here in Cape May. And there will be, you know, there's a number of aspects to it. There's definitely going to be, you know, community services and you know, self-development. There's going to be a large recovery aspect. My sister, who teaches at UPenn, she's big in the recovery movement, so she's going to be doing a lot of those things here. And there'll also be, you know, kind of an arts education aspect to what we're doing down here. And I do plan on creating, content for a number of platforms here. And as far as the format of feature-length storytelling and narrative feature film, I have one or two, I think, left in me as far as, getting them off the ground and executing them. And crowdfunding may be, a way to go for one or both of those. We'll see. When I was making indie movies back in the day, pre-internet, and then after the internet, before crowdfunding came about, I raised my money mainly from, Wall Street dudes who would throw in 50 grand or 100 grand a pop and didn't expect it back. They really just wanted to meet the actresses. And, there was foreign pre-sales. There were a number of different, kind of independent film financial products back then, which, I think it was during that economic downturn I was talking about. A lot of the funders left indie film, and some of them have, a number of them have not come back. It's harder and harder. But, the bright light, I think, for indie film, at least creation, has been crowdfunding. When you look at Kickstarter, when you look at Indiegogo, I think they've funded more independent films, than true independent, film finance companies, whether it's banks or hedge funds or so forth and so on. So a lot more are getting funded that way. And I also think it's a great kind of democratizer, because when people, they have an idea for an indie film, it's a story they've fallen in love with. I still get people pitching me, and they'll send me the script or whatever. And even before I read a script, I'll have a lot of questions. And, I'm that guy who thinks he's so good at it that he can read a script and tell me, what do you want to make it for? And they tell me $4 million. I'd like, you'd be crazy to make this for over 400,000. Because I'm also thinking about, the back end. What is the audience for this movie? Is it true that, a number of people are going to go and see it and make that 400,000 or $4 million back? Because, James is, one of a million. Because most of the time when you make a movie that doesn't make its money back, you're making it harder for yourself to make your next movie. I've had plenty of mentors tell me, hey, don't rush into just making this movie. If it takes you 4 years to put together the right movie, let it take that long. Because if you're just one of those filmmakers who's like, I just need to make another movie, and you make something and you do it quickly, and it gets into a festival or whatever, but you beg, borrow, and stole hundreds of thousands or more dollars to make the movie, and it didn't, it wasn't critically acclaimed, and it wasn't some kind of commercial success, even just $1 in the black, then you're actually hurting your own career as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
So the next movies I make, I may, truth be told, I still, at least a few times a year, I get asked to, star in a movie that's of the genre I'm known for, I guess comedy, horror, or cult movies. And I may, and I've been saying no for years because as an executive, I can't divide my focus. And I was very, very concerned that if I continued acting while I was an executive, that whatever company I was working for, I'd be like, oh, see, he still just wants to be an actor or whatever, So I really wanted to make that crystal clear to people. And I think it was one of the Variety writers that told me that, if you take Tom Cruise and all the big actors who created their own production companies out of it, I think they said I was the first actor who used to star in real movies. Yeah, they weren't $80 million movies, but who then of his own accord, essentially not creating a production company, but was hired to be an executive, and then kind of rose the executive ranks, at least in the digital world, within a short period of time. But where were we going with that?
Oh no, we were just talking about independent film, and I was going to say you're a trailblazer in that regard, Will, because just like they were saying was, you're actually sort of starting your own almost like I guess I don't want to say marketing funnel, but in a way you are, if you know what I mean, because you're finding the scripts, and then what's gonna what to make production for. So like you just said, don't make this for 4 million, make it for 400,000. Because that production side of things.
If you have to make it, and we've all talked to filmmakers like, I have to make this movie, I have to make this story, and I will grill directors. Like, why? Why do you have to? And I'll keep going because I'm trying to get down to like the essence of it. And I've had, once I start to break them down, I've had filmmakers say to me, I just want to lock people in a room and force my emotions on them. And I'm like, all right, no, that's evil. or some of them say like, I just want to make the movie I would want to go and see. I was like, all right, that's 8 people. Here's $80. Make a YouTube video. And look, plenty of people get movies made just because of their force of will. But it's not to say that there's an audience for them. It's not to say, it's not going to hurt your career if it doesn't do well. It's like you can be original by looking at what, by giving people what they want at the same time. You can add your own voice or your own style to something that people actually want to watch. That's why, I'm looking at, I've been in the digital world for years now, and these are in my mind, in many cases, the new stars. They're putting butts in seats. They're the new A-listers in a way, and we're seeing them, these digital stars, these YouTube stars or Instagram influencers. We're seeing them make movies now and do TV. So I think it's essentially traditional and digital are converging. Which is a really, really exciting time because it also affords, people just starting out or even people who've been doing it for a while, there's a new avenue to, to express yourself and or to, the new getting discovered at Schwab's drugstore is the internet.
Yeah, just making a YouTube channel like when you were at Maker, you guys ended up attracting PewDiePie, and now he was discovered, and that just his whole career trajectory. Now he's the #1 YouTuber in the world, and it's funny as we as you were talking about budgets, it's funny because I had a friend of mine who actually wrote a literal one location script, and it was going to take place inside of his own house. He could shoot it there, and and I said it was kind of. It's kind of stereotypical of an indie film. It's about a guy who loses a girl. It's one of those. But he's at his house, and so what happens is, it was going to be at his house, right, in one location, and he ended up, meeting me later on and said, "Okay, I got to raise $200,000 to shoot this thing." And I said, "Wait a minute, what do you need $200,000 for?" Like, I read the script. Yeah. I said, "You could shoot this in for like probably the change in your couch." Yeah. And he was
Did you have to see his top line budget and how much he was paying himself? I'm just kidding.
Well, it's funny. It's funny. What happened was I said, "Where's all this money going?" He goes, "Well, I have to pay a cinematographer. I've got to pay this. I got to pay that." Well, he ended up getting a production company involved, and he actually sat down with one of their producers, and she even said, like, "I don't know where all this extra money, where you got $200,000 from," and she said if we could do this whole thing for 50. And even I said, what? I said, even that, I was like, you could probably shoot, probably for a little cheaper, but and
still make it look good, and that's thanks to technology.
Yeah, and still make it look good because at some point, by the way, he ended up never making that film. By the way. But it wasn't the fact.
What
that,
I always tell filmmakers is that if you can write it, if the story's really, really good that you have, and you are dead set on getting this movie made, then in a way, budget shouldn't matter, right? And in a way, it shouldn't matter where the money comes from, so forth and so on. But write the script as if you were going to make it yourself. In this case, your friend wrote like a one location script, and that's probably one of the biggest budget busters when people write scripts and stories is that they have too many locations, too many setups, so forth and so on, too many, characters. But many times people come up with a good, writers, filmmakers come up with a good story and they overwrite it, meaning that it's a good story, but because of the way they wrote it with all the locations, you can't make it for anything less than $20 million, $40 million, $400 million, right? So, and that's a tough, mountain to climb. So what I say is that, just the essence of it, if it can be done in 5 locations, do it in 5 locations. If the story, when you start sending out the script, if the script and the characters, the dialogue, the story starts resonating with people or resonating with, big production companies, they'll find ways to make it a bigger movie and increase the budget. You don't have to do that for them. If you really want to get the movie made, write the script where you can make the movie for a certain amount of money, but if everyone still has the idea that, Imagine Entertainment is going to option your script, they will, if they like it, whether or not it looks like, a $200 million movie or a $20 million movie or a $2 million movie or a $200,000 movie. If it's good, it's good. And you can always broaden the scope. And, it's much, in acting, we used to say, it's easier to go bigger as an actor and then tone it down than it is for someone who's very toned down to do a big performance. So with script writing, I think it's the opposite. It's like, you have the story, then keep it small, but the good elements of the script are noticeable, so that you can expand it from there, because it's much harder to take a really, really good script that, my God, I love it, but there's no way you can make this for under $100 million. Then there's a lot of work that goes into trying to pare down, and then, you have a filmmaker who's watching his, these $10 million scenes, that he was so attached to, get thrown out to make it for, much less. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, and I'm glad you brought that up too, Will, because you do have 4 writing credits, and I wanted to ask, at least touch on your writing process, because I wanted to dig into that a little more and ask, do you? So actually, I'll just ask that. What is your process on writing, Will? Do you ever subscribe to a method, or do you just sort of have your own process?
Yeah, I think. Well, it depends on what I'm writing, right? I haven't taken part in writing a feature-length film script in a while, but if I remember correctly, once I'm in the mode of knowing I have to get it done, and in most cases, I think I wrote with partners, and then we would kind of divide work. Well, you write this section or this scene or so forth, and the other one writes this one, and then when we're done, we pass them to one another and essentially edit them or co-write the scenes. So when I was writing feature film scripts, whether it was alone or with a partner, I went through a process, and I think I consider myself a fast writer. I might be able to bust out a full script, or at least what I'm supposed to do for the script, pretty quickly. But then what they say, writing is rewriting. It's always kind of like fine tuning and polishing. But just like what great filmmakers said it about full movies, but same thing with scripts. It's like they're never done. You could keep going forever, making it better. There's always room for improvement, essentially, right? But there's comes a point where you have to say, okay, it's go time. There's not. It's to the point where other people are saying, this is great. I want to be involved in this, even though there's still more refining to be done. But that can be done essentially later in the process, in pre-production, or even on set, or through rehearsals with the actors and so forth.
Yeah, and also when you're talking about what you have to write, as if we again, the difference between writing an independent film, or maybe if you're let's just say you're going to write a film right now, I always tell people to do the Rodriguez list. What actors do I have access to? What locations do I have access to? What props do I have access to? And build a film around that what you have, and then you can sort of make a film around that.
Absolutely.
And then, rather
than you're baking into the cake stuff you already know, and they say, write what you know.
Yeah. Rather than, make a script where it's going to cost, $50 million in explosives and stunt work and squibs and everything else. And you don't have, we can't shoot that at my grandmom's house or anything. You know what I mean? So, when I was making my...
these are filmmakers who actually want to direct their own movies. And we all know the stories about people who wrote scripts that they wanted to direct and either didn't, or stuck to their guns and did. But there are some writers out there who just want to write a big studio movie. And that's different from what I was talking about, about writing for budget.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. I was just going to say, when I was making my student film, again, I didn't go to film school either. And when I was making my student film, basically that's what we did. We figured out what locations we had, and we just pulled all our resources together, and we shot a film at my one friend's grandparents' house. And that became pretty much like 5 locations, because we would use different rooms for different things. And it's just, again, using what we have, we have access to sort of, to make these indie films.
Yeah.
And like I tell people, even if you make an indie film and you realize, maybe this isn't going to go anywhere, You know what I suggest, Will? Honestly, I tell people sometimes just put on YouTube. I know it's as weird as that sounds. Yeah, because that way, at least, it's going to get seen. And two, it could, maybe you'll attract somebody who says, hey, you know what? If you did that for nothing, maybe, with a big, let's see what you can do with a slightly bigger budget of maybe, 5,000, 10,000.
Exactly. If you finish your movie, whether it's a shorter feature, and it's, isn't getting accepted to festivals, your only recourse is to put it online, and hope that, you can attract some attention. Like, to me, especially you're going up against, you finish your film, you're going up against so many other movies, a lot of them well-funded, especially in a marketing campaign, so you can't compete with that. How do you compete? Is one of the things Ted Hope was saying when he, he's been sounding the siren of the death knell of indie film for years. And now he's part of, one of the main people, I think, bringing it back, with Amazon's backing. Which is great. But Ted used to say, like, from day one, when you're writing your script, you start putting online, you create a page for your movie and you start putting online, like, taking a picture of the title page, the cover page of your script and putting up there and start engaging people. And they did that with Super throughout. That's why I thought it was going to be such a big hit. You take pictures of casting and there's so many, you can do live streams of your table read and so forth, because you're essentially engaging people who hopefully by the time your movie's for release, they feel somewhat invested in it, and that's your audience, because you don't have $50 or $100 million to essentially, the Hollywood business model of just moving butts and seats from one movie to the next via, essentially TV and online advertising. That costs a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's, again, we have all these options that are coming out.
I might go farther, and this is where filmmakers start to hate me, because I try to talk people out of filmmaking, because I know what goes into it. I know what the success rate is, and I try to talk people out of acting. And that's what, when I grill filmmakers or grill actors, I want to find out what their true purpose is with what they want to do. Is it fame, which is kind of shallow? Is it, you want to change the world? Is it you want to impress some people? Like, and if I find that the underlying kind of, foundation is a positive one and makes sense to me, then I'll try to help them. But there's plenty of people who made films that should have been, instead of finishing it and putting it on YouTube because no one else will play it, maybe don't make the movie in the first place and make a short film and put it on YouTube that is the essence of your feature. And, long gone are the days where, a short film at Sundance would strike a 3-picture feature deal, but there is a version of that, and it's YouTube now. So it's like, a lot of people have gotten feature film deals from shorts on YouTube. But if you've already made your movie, then you got to put it online and you got to try to show some kind of audience for it, because whether you're, whether I was a digital exec or a film producer, if I'm looking at, if someone pitches me something and I like the idea and I take a meeting or I want to learn more, either the movie played festivals and got distribution and there's numbers to look at, or, I can see the film itself, but if I see it online and it looks like it got 10,000, 100,000 views, or there's engagement and people really like it, then that helps me, as a greenlighter, as a decision maker. A lot of people are still like, well, I don't want to put it up there. I don't want someone to steal my idea. That is long and gone. That's been gone ever since the internet came out. You can hold your precious idea and never get it made, or you can, start to put it out there and do your idea better than anyone else could. So you become that person, when it comes to that idea. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that makes absolute perfect sense. I had a manager before. They weren't, meaning they weren't representing me or anything, but I was talking to them about this project that I did, and he was very adamant. He's like, "Don't put it online." He goes, "Don't do anything with it." And he goes, "Just so." And now other marketers who I really respect.
How old was he? I'm not an ageist, but I'm guessing this was a few years ago, and they were unaware of the influence that comes with people engaging with you or your content online.
Yeah, this is probably about 4 years ago or so. He's probably in his 40s, And now, talking to marketers, they were like, Dave, just, do your thing. So I'm actually, that's been something I've been sort of.
Yeah, the only people in my estimation who are getting signed, by top agencies or managers, and I've seen it for the past number of years, and I was actually a conduit for a number of them happening. Talents, whether it's on-camera talent or behind the camera talent, the ones who are getting signed are the ones who are building audiences by themselves online. There's plenty of talent out there who are not putting their stuff online, and they're great. They could be better than the talent who are getting jobs now, but this is how to get jobs now.
Yeah.
But no one ever sees your work. If no one ever sees your work, then continue with that second career, and that's probably all you're going to get.
Yeah, it's very true. I've had Jason Brubaker on here from Distributor. They actually put together a movie project for Netflix, all YouTubers. They got some of the top YouTubers, put them all together in a movie, and sold it to Netflix.
Yep.
And it worked out well because everyone, they already had.
That's big business right now. I consider that a new genre of independent filmmaking, but it's the only one. And you might have to check this too, but I'm going to make a grand statement that the only independent films that have made their money back and gone into profit, except for, the ones that really break through and get nominated for Oscars, the only independent films that make their money back and or go into profit in the past few years have been ones that have digital stars in them. And I'm talking truly independent films, and if and name me a time when a genre in independent film was profitable. This might be the first time. Independent films starring digital influencers might be the first time independent film is a sustainable business, at least for a minute. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That is true. And also, they come with their own built-in audience and everything. And I mean, that's why it's so interesting for investors, and it's why in distributors as well. And and again, I think that as we slowly come aboard, like you were saying, that's sort of being discovered in the old sweet shop. You remember there's old stories of Hollywood where an actress was discovered at like a malt shop or something. This is the new way, right?
Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, that's how you get discovered. And I tell actors too. It's like they're serious. They're even going to acting school. Like some of them, expensive acting schools, and they're not online. They're not showing their acting talent online. And it boggles my mind, because when I was a young actor before the internet, I would hope that I would have embraced it if the internet were there, and I would have, essentially showed off my talent online. And that would have worked. I've seen it work for a lot of people in the years after. But the ones who are like, no, they're still doing an actor is still doing like black box theater, but they're doing nothing online. I'm like, well, and I don't know if it's because their curriculum keeps them so busy and they don't have time to be online. But to me, it's the only way to get discovered now. Yeah,
that's so true. And because I've had people on here and we've talked about a lot of the competitions and stuff like that. And I think, it's sort of putting it all together as well. I have a friend of mine who's been on here.
What do you mean, screenwriting competitions or when you say competition? What do you mean?
Well, I generally mean screenwriting competitions. But what I was going to say was,
all that stuff's good. Submit your script, and if you get like as a finalist in Nichols or ones that are known, awesome. It's like a feather in the cap, and it would make someone like me or other greenlighters or whatever, put your script near the top. Like, oh, okay, someone, it's the group thing. Someone else liked this, and I heard of them, and then we might still read your script. You know what I mean? But as important, if not more, is that let's say instead of getting a screenwriting fellowship award for your script, which, yes, agencies, managers, production companies, if you have that on there, they'll be like, oh, okay, guess we should really read this one. But at the same time, and maybe even more powerful, is putting some kind of content online that gets 10,000 engaged views. People saying, oh my God, this is awesome. Are you going to do a larger version? Because when people are making decisions about, money, which is essentially life or death in the industry, so many people, especially in established Hollywood, everyone's afraid to stick their neck out. It's like, okay, if everyone else agrees, then maybe we'll move forward on this, So one of the things that's getting everyone on the same page these days is, look, if Nichols Screenwriting Fellowship liked it, great. Look at all the movies that they've awarded and how many got made and how many were successes, since they've been around. But if I go online and there's just the cold open of a movie and it's got engagement and people are liking it, that, where I am in my career now, if I'm going to continue to greenlight stuff and get it made, that's almost more important than the Screenwriting Fellowship.
Yeah, I actually had a friend of mine on here, Nick Murphy, and he actually started a YouTube channel. It was called Continue ? And they actually, they do panels now because they've just built that audience, and then they end up now they've done a crowdfunding campaign for another web series. They've done very well with that. And again, well,
that's great. And look, dude, to me that's networking, and you got to do that too. And that's something that people think I'm like a master networker, and I think I'm pretty good, but and everyone thinks I know everybody. And that's not true. There's plenty of people I could name who know more people in entertainment than I do, but that's the perception, right? But it took me a while to learn that. If I were to, have gotten good at networking and everything in the beginning of my career, I think it would be a little different. And I didn't want to think back then that, I don't want to have to go and schmooze. I just want to be an artist, all that kind of stuff. But, this is it's called, the entertainment industry for a reason. You gotta have both. You gotta know the business side of things, which includes networking and schmoozing, because, sometimes, look, Charlie Core, when he hired me at Endemol, that was a 15-year relationship. And then it culminated in me becoming president of, the North American digital division of the biggest TV production company in the world. I think it's the largest independent production company in the world. And that was, Charlie and I had tried to work together a few times throughout the years. We'd met in like 96 or 7, and things didn't work out. But, you gotta start, not only building your community online and building up an audience online and having people say, hey, your work's great online, so that the industry will be like, hey, the average Joe or Josephine likes this person's work. Maybe we should, give them a shot. But also, you got to start building your network as soon as you can. And if you're an actor, it's just another role. You're going out to events and meeting people, and you're playing the role of networker, and for filmmakers, the same thing. You can't, in many cases, you can still be the shy, you don't like to talk to anyone, you're very introverted, but you're a brilliant, artist or filmmaker. And if you can't get a little more extroverted online, then, these are all just learned, kind of skills that you can always improve upon, where you're at currently. If you're not much of a networker or schmoozer, read How to Win Friends and Influence People, and then just go out to one event and just try some of the techniques. And all of a sudden you're like, hey, I'm pretty good at this, But it's so important, because talent, sometimes talent rises to the top, and sometimes, the best talent never rise. And these are the reasons why. So, if you don't do your homework and find out what it takes, then you shouldn't complain about not getting a shot, about life's unfair, about, I'm so talented, I'm more talented than this person, but, they're getting jobs and I'm not, or they're getting cast and I'm not, or they're getting funded and I'm not. Okay, well then, find out why. And I guarantee why is that they're doing some other things in some other areas that you are either judging harshly, rashly, and saying, no, I don't want to have to do that. But then, it's the same in every industry. It's just a little more, it has a little more pizzazz in Hollywood.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Will, and you have to go out there and network. And, I know we've been talking for about an hour, and I know, obviously I could talk to you all day, Will. I just want to say, I wanted to ask, too, I wanted to get to talking about the Church of Babs. You currently have a GoFundMe, and by the way, everyone listening, I'm going to put this in the show notes for his GoFundMe at davebullis.com, where the show notes usually are. So, Will, I just want to ask, just about Church of Babs. Again, I saw the article about it in the Philadelphia.com Inquirer online site,
Yeah, put that link too. That was pretty good.
Yeah, I will. I'm going to make sure to put that in there as well. So I just want to, as we talk about Church of Babs, is there anything, I know we talked about it earlier, we discussed it briefly, but is there anything else you wanted to mention about the Church of Babs or, Joe?
Look, the GoFundMe campaign is gofundme.com/STBABS, St. Babs. And that's, so we've raised almost $20,000 in very short time, and we need more. The reason being that I want to, it's a 108-year-old church. I want to restore it, and then also innovate a little bit. But we also want to start a number of programs for the community and the online community. And, when I acquired this 2-acre property in Cape County, New Jersey, which is incredible, I'm surrounded by natural wildlife preserves, the Audubon Birdwatching Society, the New Jersey Motorsports Park, private beaches, public beaches. It's just an amazing, amazing area of South New Jersey that, people think of Jersey, they think of Sopranos, but especially South Jersey, I think gives Jersey its name on license plates, the Garden State. But because it's an old historical property like this, I had to, when I acquired it, I had to pay all cash. And it wasn't, I'm not a multimillionaire because you can't get or at least I couldn't get a mortgage for a property like this. It's commercially zoned, but there's no historical rental income because it was a church, and it's not a private, it's not a residential place, so no residential private mortgage lenders would lend. So I had to put all cash into it. So we're reopening, grand reopening as St. Babs in May on Mother's Day in 2017, coming up a few months. And for a whole week, we have a number of festivities happening, and certain celebrity friends of mine will be making appearances, and we'll be launching a bunch of initiatives. There'll be lots of great art and music, showing. So the money from the GoFund campaign is going to both the restoration and launching these programs. And I think, it's not just one good cause, it's many good causes. And, we're just getting started. So I think, after the opening and within the next year or two, just like I tried to do with Maker Studios and Endemol and Stream Up, I'm going to turn this into something that people will be proud of and really think well of.
And, everyone, I'm going to link to, again, in that article in the show notes. And, Will, I know you're going to do an amazing job with this. And, again, when I read the article, I said, this is amazing. And this is, such
next time we talk, thank you. Next time we talk, why don't you come to, I'm also building a studio in the church and there's lots going on here. The whole place is getting wired. Why don't you come do your podcast down here? Maybe, it's not during the grand reopening week, which I think would be fun. And I think there'll be some press that come out of that. But, that's the other thing, whether it's artists, people in need, people in recovery, I want this to be, not their second home unless they want to make it their second home, but, I'm opening the doors for people to create, to commune and so forth. So, feel free to do your podcast down here, man.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm definitely going to come down. I want to be there for the grand opening. We can meet in person.
Awesome.
And,
Yeah. Why don't we do during the opening in front of people? Why don't we do like a live podcast or something?
What? That sounds amazing. Let's do it. That
sounds absolutely. And then I'll be a guest if you want me as your guest, but maybe we'll book one or two other people too. And I'll give you the list of, the talent and the people coming, and you can look at that and say, oh, they'd be great on the podcast, and maybe we'll do it that way.
Okay, that sounds amazing, Will. And
Cool.
And I think that'll be a great tool for everybody, and because that's very interesting. I haven't done something like that yet, and I've been meaning to. And Will, before just in closing, I wanted to ask: is there anything else that you wanted to say, just in closing, that we can get a chance to discuss?
I heard from a very, very good source that Lloyd Kaufman of Troma is developing another movie based on a Shakespeare play. And I was told that not too long ago when Tromeo and Juliet played at the Museum of Modern Art in New York a few months ago. Mm-hmm. So if I do another Troma movie again, that sounds like that'd be the one.
Yeah, again, you'd be able to reunite with Lloyd, and again, I think that would be amazing, because Lloyd is always, now he's just making some really great movies too, because now with what was it, Toxic Avenger 4 came out. I thought that was very well done, and I actually bumped into Lloyd a few years ago, by the way. I'll tell you that story in person when I see you. But but I think that'd be great though, because it's I always great. It's great independent film, and so again, Will, I want to say thank you for coming on. Where do people find you at online, by the way?
I'm Will Keenan, WILLKEEENAN on Twitter. Same thing on Instagram, on Facebook. I think if you just search my name, it comes up. I have a blue check next to my name on Facebook. What else? LinkedIn, look for Will Keenan. And now there's a St. Babs, the foundation I just started, Facebook and Instagram. Please follow those as well.
And everyone, I'm going to link to those all in the show notes, again, at davebullis.com. And you can find everything, and you can talk to Will online. And again, I want to link to the article again about the Church of Babs that was in the Philadelphia.com website. And Will Keenan, I want to say thank you so much for coming on.
Dave Bullis, thanks for asking me. This was great. This was fun. Let's do it again.
It sounds great, my friend. I will talk to you very soon.
All right. Take care, man.
Take care, Will.
Bye, everybody.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.